72 hours. That's all it took for everything to start falling apart. Not slowly, not quietly, but like something that had been held together for years suddenly cracking all at once. And at the center of it, a name nobody was really paying attention to before. Not Claressa Shields, not the person everyone was arguing about online. The real name sitting underneath all of it was Katia. And the wild part, this wasn't new. This didn't just happen overnight. This wasn't some random situation that popped up out of nowhere. This was something that had been building for years, quietly, carefully, almost like it was designed not to be noticed. At first, people thought this whole situation was simple. A messy relationship, some cheating rumors, a little industry drama. That's what it looked like on the surface. But the deeper you go, the less it looks like a normal situation, and the more it starts to feel like something structured, almost planned. Because when you really start connecting the dots, this doesn't look like one relationship overlapping another. It looks like multiple lives running at the same time. So instead of starting where everyone else started, with headlines and viral clips, you have to go back, way back to a time when nobody was even paying attention. That year doesn't seem important at first. Nothing major blew up publicly. No big scandal, no loud drama. But that's exactly why it matters, because that's where the quiet pieces were being put into place. During that time, Papoose was moving differently. He was dropping music constantly, almost like he was trying to prove something. Album after album, track after track, staying active in a way that didn't really match the attention he was getting. It felt like there was a reason behind it, something bigger than just music. And then there's one specific detail that changes everything. A track called Counting Green. On that track, there's a feature, a name that most people didn't recognize at the time. Katia. Now, at first, that might not seem like a big deal. Artists collaborate all the time. That's normal. But this wasn't just some random feature. This was someone being introduced into his world quietly before anyone even knew to look. And when you follow that name, things start getting deeper. Katia wasn't just another artist trying to get on. She had connections already built into his circle. Her cousin, a producer, had already been working closely with Papoose, not just once or twice, but consistently, producing tracks, building sound, helping shape the music. So now it's not random anymore. Now it's connected. And once you see that connection, everything else starts to shift, because this wasn't just about music. There's another layer, a bigger one. Katia's family isn't just involved in music casually. There's a label, a real business structure, something with ownership, control, and long-term positioning. And that's where things start to feel different. Because now you're not just looking at relationships, you're looking at networks. And this is the part people missed. While everyone was focused on what looked like a public situation, something much quieter was being built in the background, something that didn't need attention to grow. And by the time people finally started noticing, it was already established. Now fast forward a little, and suddenly Claressa enters the picture loud, confident, visible, someone who naturally pulls attention wherever she goes. And instantly, the narrative shifts toward her. People start assuming she's the center of everything. But what if she wasn't? What if she was just the part everyone could see? Because while all the attention was on her, nobody was asking a very simple question. Who was already there before she arrived? And the answer to that question changes everything, because once you realize that Katia was already connected, already present, already involved, the entire story starts to flip. Now, it's not about who came in, it's about who never left. And that's when things start getting uncomfortable, because the timeline doesn't lie. And the more you look at it, the clearer it becomes that this situation didn't start where people think it did. It started long before anyone was watching. And the person everyone thought was the main character might not have been the main character at all. Once you really start lining things up, the story doesn't just get messy. It gets complicated in a way that makes you question everything you thought you understood. Because now you're not just looking at who was involved. You're looking at how they were connected. And that's where things take a turn. There's a label in the middle of all this, not just any label, but one that ties directly back into Kadia's world. Family-owned, controlled, and built from within. This isn't some outside industry situation. This is internal, personal. And then suddenly Claressa becomes part of that same structure. Big deal, big headlines, a major signing that gets people talking. On the surface, it looks like an opportunity, like a win. But when you step back and look at it differently, it starts to feel like something else, because now you've got the same people connected across everything. The music, the business, the relationships, all overlapping. And right in the middle of it is Papoose holding a position of power inside that same system. That's not coincidence. That's alignment. And when everything aligns like that, it raises questions. Because now it's not just about who's dating who, it's about who's positioned where. At the same time, Claressa is becoming more vocal, more reactive, more visible in the drama, responding, defending, going back and forth publicly. And the louder she gets, the more attention she pulls. But here's the part that stands out. While she's doing all that, Kadia isn't. She's quiet, moving in the background, still connected, still present, but not part of the noise. And that contrast matters, because in situations like this, the loudest person usually isn't the one with the most control. They're the one reacting. And reacting means you're not fully aware of what's happening around you. There were even moments where people tried to point this out, tried to warn her in real time, saying things that didn't fully make sense back then, but now hit differently. Like being told she wasn't at the top of the list. Not even close. At the time, it sounded crazy. Now, not so much. Because when you really think about it, everything she was reacting to was already in motion long before she stepped in. Which means she wasn't disrupting anything. She was stepping into something that was already built. And that realization changes the emotional weight of everything. Because now it's not just drama, it's misalignment. And that's where Remy Ma comes back into the picture. Because while all of this was happening, she wasn't surprised. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't scrambling to figure things out. She was speaking like someone who already knew. And that's what people ignored. They heard her, but they didn't listen. They assumed it was emotion, anger, bitterness. But what if it wasn't? What if it was information? Because when you go back and compare what she said to what's being uncovered now, it lines up a little too well. Not perfectly, but enough to make you pause. And once you pause, you start seeing the pattern. This wasn't one moment. This wasn't one mistake. This was something repeated over time, quietly. And the people involved weren't all playing the same role. Some were reacting, some were watching, and some were building. And when you realize that, the story stops feeling random. It starts feeling layered. And the deeper you go, the more you start to understand why everything is unfolding the way it is now. Because nothing about this feels sudden anymore. It feels delayed, like something that was always going to come out, just not this fast. And now that it has, there's no way to look at it the same again. By the time everything reaches this point, the story doesn't feel like a story anymore. It feels like something you're slowly piecing together, realizing that what you thought was clear was never actually complete. Because now you're not just asking what happened, you're asking what was real from the beginning. And that's the part that hits the hardest. Because when someone appears consistent on the outside for years, you start to believe that's who they are, that the image matches the reality. But situations like this remind you that consistency in public doesn't always mean honesty in private. And that's where everything starts to shift emotionally, because now you've got one person who was loud, visible, and confident, slowly realizing things might not be what they seemed. Another person who was quiet, steady, and always present, starting to look more central than anyone expected. And someone else who had been speaking for a long time, finally being taken seriously. But even with all of that, there's still one important thing to hold on to. Not everything being said can be proven. And that matters, because it's easy to take patterns, connect dots, and turn them into conclusions, especially when the story feels like it makes sense. But feeling like something makes sense and actually knowing it's true are two different things. And that's where people have to be careful, because this situation sits right in that space between what's visible and what's assumed. Yes, the timelines raise questions. Yes, the connections are real. Yes, the overlap is hard to ignore. But intent, motive, planning, that's where things become less clear. And that's why this story is still unfolding, because the more people look into it, the more perspectives start forming. Some will see strategy. Some will see coincidence, some will see manipulation, others will see misunderstanding, and the truth is probably sitting somewhere in between. But regardless of where you land, one thing is clear. This was never as simple as it looked. It wasn't just about one person being involved with another. It was about timing, positioning, and perception, about who knew what and when. And maybe the biggest takeaway from all of it is this: the loudest moments in a story aren't always the most important ones. Sometimes the real story is happening quietly in the background, long before anyone notices. And by the time it finally comes to the surface, it's already too late to see it the way it actually happened. Now, the question is, was this all just a complicated situation that got misunderstood? Or was there always more going on behind the scenes than anyone was supposed to see? Because depending on how you answer that, the entire story changes. And something tells me we still don't have the full picture yet.